Hey guys, this is Adam, and I'm here with Coach Kat Peters for a
Hey
Mind
guys.
Over Matter podcast. I'm excited for this one. We also had some really awesome off-air conversation prior, but
Yes.
today's podcast is going to be out preventing burnout, which is super, super common. One reason I really like to talk to someone experienced like Kat, she's been on my team for a long time, even prior to coaching. And you've seen a lot of people come and go. You've seen some great competitors that I've had where I look back and I know that they would be pro if they had kept going. And everyone has their different reasons for stopping. Who knows? Maybe they'll come back and they'll be like, I heard you talking about me on your podcast. But at the end of the day, I think sometimes we really get caught up on getting to our destination faster than we should. And then we end up, getting burnout. And,
Yeah.
this is a very repetitive sport where it's cut, it's grow, repair hormones, and cut and repeat again. And a lot of the same movements for the most part until you reach a superior like super physiological muscular tissue. Until you get to that point, you're going to be growing and just kind of repeating this very repetitive process, which is bodybuilding. So one of the things we wanted to talk about was how to prevent that burnout for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this topic because obviously it not only applies to bodybuilding, but also life and even like the ADHD stuff. So I'll get into that a little bit later in the conversation. But yeah, I have seen it as well, just with friends of mine, and just, yeah, other teammates, people that have left, people, other teams, where, you see people that have this like, great track record and competing, and then all of a sudden they're just gone. They just fall off. And sometimes it's just a different focus on different goals. But other times it's just they get so wrecked by the diet and the grueling cardio that they just want nothing to do with anything else. It just leaves such a bad taste in their mouth. And it is sad to see. It's kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, I think that, when we look at this on a basic level, what are the three things that potentially like burn people out? And I think it's cardio. I think it's training. It's then nutrition. We could maybe throw a fourth component in just tracking that data can be very time consuming. And
Yeah.
I think that, with See You Later Leaner, we do a really great approach on knowing when to track these things. When are these things important? Like just in general, we have clients track, menstrual cycles sometimes, steps on occasion when needed. We have people track their glucose, but they're not always doing these things all the time. And heck, we might not even have people tracking macros all the time either. Just recently, one of my clients got her third untracked day a week, and we're really focusing on a Monday through Thursday, good tracking, and that little bit of freedom on the weekend. So as long as the client shows that they can do that and handle it effectively, I actually think that helps them in the long game versus being so rigid and saying your macros must be 523 grams of carbohydrates.
Right.
And
Right.
you actually, that relief of stress actually hormonally just seems to help my clients a lot. I just recently had a girl come over. She was, and that's kind of what sparked this interest in the topic. Her coach had her tracking her steps in the off season, and I thought that was a little too rigid. At the end of the day, you're either gaining weight or losing weight. Uh, Her averages, when I looked at her chart, she was hitting pretty much the same steps every day. So there was really no reason to track it. Yeah, she might go to an amusement park one day and double her step count. But, you would expect weight to possibly go down for that, and it's really no big deal at the end of the day.
Yeah. And, I mean, just considering like the off season, you're going to be eating more, you're going to be having more energy. And a lot of the research does show that, people tend to slow down when they are dieting in order to conserve some of that caloric burn. So, uh, you know, data is great, but it's, like you mentioned, like there's a time and a place. And, um, I think especially too, like, seeing where your client is at mentally has a huge like component to it, because for some people, like, tracking steps or tracking macros all the time, like for some people that's their like livelihood. They love it and they don't get sick of it, and that's like their, kind of their lifeline to hold on to when things get crazy. I've seen that in some of my clients, where I've offered like, hey, let's pull back a little bit. Let's do more of an intuitive approach. Let's do more, calorie focused if you need a little bit of structure. And they're like, no, I want the full macros, because this is my one thing to focus on when things are crazy. So I think you kind of have to definitely figure out like which one it is for your clients. Is it just overkill and it's just running them into the ground, or is it something that's actually, energizing them and reinvigorating them to focus on a goal that means, that is maybe like the one thing that gets them through the day.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I really liked about that is, there are clients like that
Mhm.
you do try to give them a little freedom, and actually they do feel a little bit more relaxed with the tracking.
Yeah.
So you do have to have a dynamic approach. The other day I talked to a client, and she remembered going really off the rails on, just not tracking. So she was afraid to have that power or freedom, essentially. So we decided just to raise her refeed macros, because she was essentially just handling her refeed so well. And yeah, she was post prep, and mental state is still really good. She wants to
Awesome.
track most things. Some people even track water. And I always thought that was funny. Every popular Instagram coach right now points to the reel and says, make sure you drink your gallon of water a day. So we better do it. But at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with letting your thirst just guide you.
Yeah.
And if you are thirsty, that is your cue to drink. Just even the slightest bit of dehydration can lead to a little bit of kidney dysfunction that can be irreparable. Another reason we don't cut water on show day. But, people sometimes put too much value in like tracking every single ounce, because if you're not thirsty, you actually may need a little bit less than a gallon. That's not going to be the standard for everyone or their activity, or what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And of course, we make modifications with our coaching, which is super cool. Because I know, like, for the ADHD kids like me, we will get hyper fixated on something. And if we don't have like a water goal, it's not happening. We just won't drink water all day. So totally understand that. But yeah, absolutely. It is, in terms of like preventing burnout, I think it is super important to be able to walk that line and like understand, um, that sometimes less is more. Sometimes that's really all it is just knowing when to pull back. I see way too many people jump from prep to prep to prep. They try to take the shortest off season possible because they think that's what they should do, or they really want that pro status, or they really want that overall, and they're not actually taking the time to pull back and listen to their mental health and realize that maybe their heart isn't totally in it. And that's where you'll see people get through half of a season, and then the binge eating starts, and the kind of halfway doing the cardio and not really putting everything into the workouts, not putting everything into, each session within reason. And they just kind of spin their wheels. And, you see that a lot because they didn't take the time to pull back and focus on other things when, maybe they had that little inkling in their heart that was like, hey, maybe this is a memory season instead of a prep season.
Yeah. or sometimes you'll see they don't even improve because there was no time off in the
Yes,
first
that
place.
too.
So I've noticed that a lot of coaches are keeping girls lean just so they can go season to season to season. And it's a great advertisement for them because they're putting more people on stage, but are they really getting as good as they could? And also, you always have to do what's good for your clients versus yourself. Yes, if I had Jamie Lundberg do another nationals, she'd probably be pro by now, but we really felt mentally and physically she needed a break after getting 1 point away from a pro card in universe. And Hope Riccobino was the same way, and she kind of wanted to do the Masters USAs, and I said I really think we should take a break right now and then go into the season. And I guess to be announced, we'll hopefully see a good return on that investment into my clients on their mental health and their physical and hormonal health.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important thing to hit on, is that, like, are you the best that you could be? I mean, taking the metabolic and hormonal, implications of a short off season, or, staying too lean or less, more lean than ideal in an off season, I should say, taking that out of the equation just mentally, if like, this is what I tell my clients, like, basically, I tell my clients that, we know that an off season is ready to be over when you are at the point where, not so much physically looking at yourself, you're uncomfortable, but more so when you're like, I'm just tired of eating. I just don't feel any type of way about food anymore. And, like, all the cakes and cookies and all this stuff, I could take it or leave it. It's not a big deal. And I'm just tired of food. That's kind of a good mental place to be, where you're like, okay, I think I'm ready to be hungry again, when you almost miss being hungry, and that, I find personally, and just what I've observed with clients, it does help you to have more of a push in prep, because you miss that feeling. You miss that feeling of, like, not being stuffed at the end of the night, and, just working towards a different goal. So when you're kind of sick of it, it helps you to put more into it, I think, when you're ready to be hungry, you're ready to do it.
Yeah, just like the other end, when you're hungry, you're just ready to bulk and,
Yes. Yes.
hopefully responsibly, but you're just ready to be strong in the gym again. You're
Yeah.
like, I'm tired of my pull-ups being the only lift to go up because my
Right.
body weight's lighter. I'm ready to see my squat, bench, and deadlift and those big compounds move. And that's definitely exciting. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so good question for you. You've been in an off season for about um a little over a year now, like a year and 4 months. How have you been able to keep really motivated? Because I've been seeing you're progressing, monthly, and you're doing a really good job on, well, one, I would say just self accountability. And second, you're making really good progress in one, just like keeping a good mental state, but two, you're getting your workouts in. If people don't know, Cats in California, so they've pretty much had a complete lockdown for the whole time, and you've been doing home workouts pretty much this whole time too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, things have been open for a while now. We have our mask mandate back in place, but for the most part, I mean, I will admit, doing an off season during a pandemic, like when the gyms were closed, that was hard, because at the time, my husband and I did not have our full garage gym. Like, we just had a little bit of stuff, and so that was like a really big adjustment. Definitely hard mentally. But I'm lucky because we've built up our garage gym, and so it's just, I've adjusted to that, and now it's like, okay, we go to the garage together and we work out together, and that's kind of our thing. But in regards to staying motivated, and this is something that I tell my clients too, just because this has always helped me, is to really focus on your progressive overload, focusing on adding that weight to your squat or your deadlift or your hip thrust, or whatever your focus is for that day. Really focusing on adding that weekly. And I before I started competing, I had more of like a powerlifting background, and so that always excites me to be like really strong and to focus on like getting my big, well, not big three anymore, but before it was my big three. Can't bench anymore. Boob job problems. Most competitors will know that. I could say that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But, focusing on getting those totals up and, making that like the thing that I'm proud of instead of being proud of having abs, really helps me to stay grounded, and then I'm one of those people in terms of like nutrition that I like the numbers. The numbers just give me, something to focus on, just because, as we've talked about before, I will not hit my protein if I don't have actual numbers to focus on. And, being married to somebody that is also a year-round tracker. So it's just kind of second nature for us. But I know myself well enough at this point that when I need to pull back and do more of, a calorie focused approach, or having, an untracked day, once a week or something like that, I kind of know when I need those things and I just implement it according to that, but still have planned unstructured.
Absolutely. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to bring that to light is you've done a really good job of like grinding in silence, kind of, because you don't really post about yourself that much. And, a lot of people, what people don't realize that kind of came into the fitness industry now is that Instagram kind of became like, my audience is watching. I'm going to throw out every workout that I do. And then if that stops happening, probably some people are going to reach out and say, oh, where are you at? But one thing I've always liked about you is you just like, you've always been this way. You just get it done. And it always happens behind scenes. And what I like about that is when you compete again, you're going to be kind of like that dark horse that no one sees coming, that snags that pro card, and everyone will be like, where'd she come from?
Yeah, so funny thing is, I always struggle with social media. So like it's a blessing and a curse, because you can ask any of my friends or anyone, my DMs are a mess. I'm terrible at answering them. I think it's kind of a anxiety, ADHD thing where I'm just like, I find it kind of draining sometimes to be on social media. So for my own mental health, I don't necessarily post that much. But also just, I've always been one of those people that energetically, sometimes I'm running on empty, just, mentally, emotionally, whatever. And I don't, if I'm going to put what I have left in the tank into something, it's going to be my workouts instead of, creating something engaging for my audience. I think it's awesome when people can do both, but I'm definitely not one of those people. So that's kind of my default, is just to do what I need to do and focus on me. And everything else is kind of second in regards to like the Instagram, TikTok, whatever sort of stuff.
Absolutely. I took down a couple notes before we did this, just things we can do, and we kind of covered them lightly. Things people can do to stay motivated, from burnout. And one of the things I said was actually keeping the data you are tracking really organized, because if that becomes a mess, you end up getting behind. And then if you don't write things down, those goals just kind of diminish. So at least taking some time once a week to, write some things down, how were my workouts? Also, what comes with that is maybe the accountability of a coach. So you have somebody to report to, but that won't apply for everyone. The other was making a schedule that you stick to every week, since there is some flexibility. If you're going down to like 4 training days a week, I've found personally with my clients, when they have that much flexibility with when they can hit their workouts, sometimes they might hit less because they have so much time to make up for those workouts. Well, if they end up missing 2 or 3 days in a row, then they get way behind. So, having a schedule, and then also just being honest with yourself on how you're feeling. Um, are you wanting to eat more because you're actually hungry, or is it like an avoidance measure? A lot of people get kind of tricked into, I want to do intuitive eating in the off season, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you really have to be honest with yourself on if you can handle that.
Mhm.
And a lot of people will go to intuitive because they're burnt out, but I definitely don't recommend intuitive eating for someone that's maybe only competed once and never reversed before.
Mhm.
And I definitely would say your intuition needs to be based off of something that you have learned. So maybe tracking macros for a year gives you a really good, itinerary for, these are how many protein, carbs, and fats I can handle. And, maybe I can try 3 or 4 days a week where I don't track, see what my weight does. Test your intuition first versus
Yeah.
just saying I'm going all intuitive 7 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm definitely I'm less of an advocate for intuitive eating just because I know how screwy things can get, like especially after a show, which I know you do too, but just for anybody listening, it definitely depends on when you last did a show, because right out of the gate, intuitive eating, no go. Even if you're burnt out, there's going to be some physical and mental and emotional ramifications that are going to come from that choice. Because your intuition is going to lie to you for sure. So don't do that right out of the gate. But yeah, definitely just kind of back to preventing burnout. This is kind of going to be more of a general speaking as like the mental health counselor side of things. Um, Less is more, and that's hard for people because of the society that we live in. People tend to have this idea of like work, work, work. If I work, 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 it's going to be better for me. It's going to be better for my family, which yes, but also no, because if you hit burnout, good luck. You're going to have a hell of a time trying to pull yourself out of that. So it really comes down to um, prioritizing yourself and knowing when you need to step back and just be, quote unquote, lazy. I don't like the word lazy. But there's nothing wrong with slowing down. And sometimes that's the number one thing that you got to do, whatever that looks like for somebody, because it's going to vary person to person, but slow down, do less. Yeah,
Mhm.
maybe it means pulling back your workouts to 4 days a week. Maybe it means, changing up your workouts or your cardio to something that you just find fun and it's less like goal focus. It's less, progressive overload or whatever. There's nothing wrong with, um, adjusting temporarily to prevent that burnout, to just really find something that brings you joy and putting yourself first. And like I said, being a little quote unquote lazy, so that you can recharge.
Mhm.
And it's also important to recognize the signs of what burnout looks like and when it's starting. So speaking from like somebody that is, has ADHD, is, neurodivergent. So anybody that classifies under that, so whether you're autistic or ADHD or whatever, people like myself, I can tell because the messes start showing up. The
Mhm.
clothing piles start showing up and the cups are everywhere. And it's kind of, those are kind of my red flags of like, oh, we're walking a fine line here. I need to go to my kind of self isolation, not really doing anything mode to recharge and just focus on, reading or whatever the things that I enjoy, outside of like working out, because obviously working out is like my that reinvigorates me. But recognizing those signs, what those look like for you, how do you know that you're walking that line of like, I'm not in a good place right now. I need to be able to pull back. And uh, obviously, ADHD people, it's a little different. If you're unmedicated, it's going to happen regardless, because you're going to hyperfixate and then you're going to crash. But I think everybody, even neurotypical people, we all have those signs of what they are, when you're getting to burnout. I don't know if you want to share what like your signs are, but for me, it's the clothing piles.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I had a couple weeks ago that my office just really needed to be cleaned, and like I remember just the workflow so much better, and since I work in my office a lot of times, that's just a constant reminder of just disarray.
Yeah.
Where did I put this note for this client that I maybe needed to send them a new weekly summary or whatever it was, so, stuff like that can build up. And yeah, it just, it kind of pulls you different directions and takes your focus away. And you kind of covered one of mine, like change up your workout programming. Obviously, keep the compounds in, but don't be afraid to throw, some fancy stuff on the end. A lot of coaches will get a little upset about that. They're like, just stick to the basics. Don't throw, kickbacks in. They're like, it's a dumb exercise. But, at the same time, maybe eating veggie straws isn't the best thing in the world to get a lot of carbs in. But at the same time, if you do enough of them, it does get the job done, and it does provide a variety. So I do like to look at exercise selection, similar to food selection. Focus on some big things, but throw some small things in too that you do enjoy. And then cardio is a big one for me. Just swimming, biking, running. I have people doing like Orange Theory or the F45. Experience things that you enjoy as well. I think that's really important for our audience to remember, is that, your cardio doesn't always have to be on a true treadmill in the gym. And a lot of people forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, the thing is like, yes, from a coaching point of view, like obviously we have our textbook, we have our gold standard stuff that we would like clients to do. But the problem with textbook and gold standard is it takes the mental and emotional aspects completely out of it. And, we're all human beings. We're not robots. It'd be nice if we could just, keep on going and pour from an empty cup and just do exactly what we're supposed to do. That's the gold standard. But you're gonna not end up like, you're gonna burn out if you do that. Like we're talking about burnout here. It's gonna happen if you continue to do things that you don't enjoy and not find a way to like sprinkle in the things that maybe are not practical, maybe are not textbook, maybe they're not gold standard, but they make you happy. Happy people tend to perform a hell of a lot better than somebody that's miserable and just, doing the gold standard all the time. And so that's why it does become that balance of, you know, doing the things that bring you joy and, going through the routines of the things that maybe don't. And those things will change. Burnout doesn't last forever.
Mhm.
Having to like make modifications to prevent burnout or to get through a burnout, it's not going to last forever. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with shifting your focus if it's going to help you to be better mentally, because if you're better mentally, that's going to set you in a much better place in the future, to be able to give it your all and create better results and create a better foundation for, whatever your goal ends up being later on.
Mhm. And I'll make a pretty big statement here. Very few people are going to love this enough that, yeah, don't want to take a break from it. Or, like you're going to have times where you wonder, is this sport for me? Am I cut out for it? Because everyone on Instagram's like acting like they love this stuff. And honestly, like people are pretty normal and they do want a break here and there. And they do have some balance in life, but sometimes balance doesn't sell. So keep that in mind when you're viewing some of these pros stories. And also just know a lot of these people that you're aspiring to be have done this for years. I was at the NPC Nationals and I had seen one of my old clients, and I caught up with her. I just asked, what season is this for you? And she said, this is my ninth season in a row. and she made third call outs. So, she was kind of disappointed from some of her other call outs. But it was a tough nationals. But one thing I said, you must really love this to do 9 seasons in a row. I said, I don't know many people that can do that. I said, I really applaud you for being able to stick in that much. I said, you really love this if you haven't taken a break. But I did say, not to overstep my bounds, you might need a break because hormonally that might be better. And she had said this prep was her hardest one ever. I said, things are probably starting to catch up with you a bit. And, the last thing she wanted to hear was that she maybe needed a break from something she loved. And, I said, that's kind of a wonderful problem to have as long as you're willing to listen and evolve.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, absolutely, there's people that, they love it and they want to like do it all the time. I've definitely had clients like that before. And, the way that I like to frame it for them, in case anybody that's listening is finding themselves, in that situation, I think sometimes there's a mental block towards off season because, we call it off season, right? So we just assume that it's not necessarily this thing that's imperative to the goal of competing. But I like to remind my clients and even remind myself that like the off season, that's kind of the foundation for the house that you're going to build. So the house being the prep, and the competition season, that's your foundation, right? So it's still working towards that ultimate goal of, placing well in a show, building that house, right? It's just a different focus. It's just that important part that you really need that people don't focus on, but it's still ultimately working towards that same goal. But yeah, people don't advertise that on social media. It's not as sexy to be like, hey, I'm in my off season and I've gained 20, 30 pounds. It's not as, you don't want to post those swimsuit pictures per se. And you'll even see that, not to put the pros on blast, but a lot of the pros, they will just post throwback pictures. And that's why they look like they're lean all the time, because guess what? That's an old picture. They don't look like that. You see them at a show in person and, they look fit and healthy and fantastic, but they don't look absolutely peeled like they're posting on Instagram. So it's kind of, people don't advertise that part of things. And so sometimes people get into competing without knowing what to really expect. And they get into an off season without knowing what to really expect. And I feel bad sometimes because I am a very transparent and open person. And so sometimes it can come across negative when I'm like, hey, you're going to expect this and this and this. But I like people to know full transparency, because we all see the good, right? We all see the really cool stuff that gets advertised on Instagram, and people that you talk to, or if you go to a show, you see all the cool stuff, but you don't see the stuff behind the scenes that is going to be the physical and mental battle that you're going to go through, whether that's in season or off season.
Yeah.
And you got to prep yourself for that. I think that's important for the whole burnout thing too, is just being able to be real about what you're getting into and some of the stuff that you're going to have to come across, whether you're in or whether you're in a prep or you're in an off season, because there's a lot.
And we're not going to see you as weak as coaches. We're going to help you get through that.
Oh yeah.
And, one thing I should bring up is we've talked about a lot of burnout off season. That's typically where it happens the most. But, some of these girls chasing Olympia points or Olympia qualification, or even just someone who does maybe too many amateur shows, this can happen in the in season too, guys. So it's definitely variable. The travel really gets to you. I was gone for 10 days for shows essentially, and I wanted nothing more just to be home with my dogs. It didn't mean I hated competing, but if I had one more show next weekend, I think I'd be like, I'm staying home for this one. Not that I'm burnt out, but it's just time to regroup. And it's weird when I leave for shows, I feel disconnected in a way, but then really connected because then I'm there with people. So it's a different sense of connection with a small group. But then, since I'm gone, maybe Friday through Sunday, it's hard if there's people, that maybe I need to have a phone call with, and I'm not sure what my schedule is going to be. So we end up waiting till Monday to do that. But yeah, it always ends up a little bit difficult.
Yeah, yeah. I do want to like come back to that point of like burnout happening in season, because that is something that I did want to mention. Um, I think one of the biggest signs for that, and you know, again, like I'm an honest person, so I've had to have that conversation before with competitors of like, do we want to continue this season or do we want to pull out? Um, because I've seen it before in myself, in other girls that I've known, where you're doing show after show and maybe you're bringing your best, but it's not going how you wanted it to go, and it starts to really weigh on you. It starts to get to a point where you're not able to take the criticism and separate that criticism of bringing the most attainable physique that you're capable of, without like intermingling that with your self-worth. And when we get to that point, sometimes if you're not able to like regroup mentally and realize that obviously that has nothing to do with how good you look, it has nothing to do with your self-worth, it shouldn't impact your self-confidence, it doesn't mean that you're not bringing your best or you're not trying hard enough, or that doesn't mean that you're not good enough. When you're not able to separate those things, that's when sometimes it might be time to pull back and just step back, because you're walking a fine line. And again, that's where we can get to that mental and emotional burnout and make you not feel good about yourself. Because at the end of the day, as hard as competing is, it should be fun. There's going to be days where it's not fun, but at the end of the day, it should be something that you're like, okay, yeah, there was a lot of parts there that sucked, but I had a good time. At the grand scheme of things, I had a good time. If you didn't have a good time and your whole thing is hinging on that judge feedback and you're starting to feel really crappy about it, pull back, go to the off season. You're not doing yourself any favors. Just because maybe you're almost there, sometimes there's a time to step back to keep yourself in a mental and emotional good place so that you can go forward and do it again in the future, and not just put the nail in the coffin just because you were almost there,
1000%. I think that's a great way to kind of approach that.
It's something that I've had to learn the hard way a couple times, where I've really like wanted to push myself, but I realized that it was damaging my self-confidence too much. And that's actually kind of why I decided, I mean, pandemic aside, because that's a whole other whole other mess. But that's kind of how I ended up in such a long off season, because I was like, you know what, this isn't necessarily something that's fun for me right now. I needed to shift my mindset and my focus onto something else and something different, so that way I could kind of let that fire regrow inside of me of wanting to step on stage again. When it starts to hurt your self-confidence, it's not worth it.
Absolutely. I think this was a perfect podcast to cover this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will enjoy this one and definitely relate to it. I know it's something that we've all been through, whether you're a competitor or not, even just like a work life, home life sort of thing. I think anybody can relate to burnout.
This is just a snippet of what potential clients could potentially join in joining our team. We do daily Zoom calls Monday through Friday for our team. So if you guys like this podcast, definitely look at inquiring through our website, www.seeyoulaterleaner.com. And we have a great line of coaches and a lot of great info to share. So thanks for you guys' support. And we will be back next week with another podcast.
See you guys.